Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for participating in today's global seminar. This is the 37th seminar in the series since it started last year. My name is Firman Witular, and I am hosting today's session with Chut Nurkemala Mulyani and Gema Satria Mayang Sediati. We acknowledge, celebrate, and pay our respects to the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people of the Canberra region and to all First Nations Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and work, and whose cultures are among the oldest continuing cultures in human history. This seminar is made possible with the support of the Australian National University and the Departments of Foreign Affairs and Trade. As we know, gender-based violence is a worldwide problem, and it comes in many forms: physical, sexual, emotional, and economic. It can happen everywhere, in public space, workplace, at home, and online. Due to the nature of the problem, statistics are hard to come by. But there have been reports from other countries that gender-based violence have increased during the current pandemic, as it has in many previous times of emergencies such as war, conflicts, and economic crisis. And as you may have seen in our advertisement for this webinar, the number from LBH APIK, a leading network of 16 legal aid societies in Indonesia working on advancing women's human rights, justice, and development, suggests that this increase may have happened in Indonesia as well. Today, we are grateful to have three distinguished guests who have spent years working on these issues here with us. Our first speaker is going to be Ibu Dr. Sri Wiyanti Eddyono, or Ibu II, an assistant professor at the Faculty of Law at the University of Gadjah Mada in Yogyakarta. She's also the chair of Law, Gender, and Society Research Center. Ibu Yi received her PhD from Monash University before coming to GM has an activist background working for LBH APIK, and she was also a commissioner at Komnas Perempuan. Dr. Yi will look at the development of law and practice that leads to restorative justice for the victim. And then as the second speaker, we will have Ibu Siti Husna, an advocate from LBH APIK, and she will share her organization's experience in handling gender-based domestic violence cases during the pandemic. And finally, we will have Ibu Professor Alimatul Qibtiyah, a commissioner at Komnas Perempuan, National Commission on Violence Against Women. She is also a professor in gender studies at the University Islam Negeri, State Islamic University, Sunan Kalijaga in Yogyakarta. Bu Alim has her PhD from Western Sydney University and has a long experience working on women's issues inside and outside the academia. She will discuss the relevant national data on gender-based violence. Each speaker will speak for about 15 minutes, and at the end of the talk, there will be, as usual, a question and answer session, a Q&A. But if you want, you can type your question at any time in the Q&A box, and we will get back to you. So first, let me invite Ibu Yi to give her presentation. Silakan, Bu.
Thank you very much for the introductions and also for the sessions. I was a bit shocked because I thought I will be the third panel, but now I moved to the first one. That's okay. So let me open my PPT if you don't mind. So I will share my screens. Yeah. All right. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, and salam kebajikan, and God bless us. So today's presentations, I will share my opinion about the challenge in the implementations of law on anti-domestic violence during pandemic in Indonesia. So as we are aware that Indonesia has established the law number 23/2004. It is the law on anti-domestic violence. So the law is actually very significant because it part of the biggest advance or biggest result of the long advocacy done by women's movement in Indonesia. So it was a long process when finally the law was established. And then the more important of the law of anti-domestic violence is actually as the recognition of the existence of domestic violence as gender-based crimes that happens in Indonesia, and then also as the acknowledgement the gap in legal system in responding domestic violence. So before we didn't have anti-domestic violence, so we do have a criminal code, penal code that regulate domestic violence, but it is only for the physical violence. But in the law on anti-domestic violence, the form of domestic violence is broader. So it is including the physical, psychological, sexual violence, but also the negligence. So what is the importance of the law? It is actually have a different degrees of every form of violence. For example, in a physical violence, they have different three categories, whether it is the light and then ordinary, but also the serious physical violence. And it also happens to the categories of the psychological and sexual violence. But the negligence is quite special. Negligence is part of like the member of the family didn't pay attention, don't run their obligation for particularly in economic obligation. So it's also kind of part of the domestic violence in Indonesia and anti-domestic violence law. And then there are different categories as well. For example, several forms of violence can be categorized as delik aduan, or we call that as reported crime. So this crime can be only processed to the criminal court or processed to the police when the person, the victim itself report to the case. For the delik aduan, usually the person can withdraw the charge. It means that if she doesn't want to continue the process into the court. So, but only a specific can be categorized as delik aduan, which is it's more likely as the light, the light, or the it's more like the light of domestic violence. So which is not have a very serious impact for the victims. But most of the crime is categorized as delik biasa. It means that anybody who can see the crimes can report it to the police. It's not depend on whether the victims want to report it to the police or not. So that's two categories. And the other ones, there are criminal sanctions. Mostly for the crimes, it can be fine and also imprisonment. And then the more important aspect of the law is actually the recognition of the right of the victims. Because in our criminal justice system, particularly in criminal procedural law, the right of the victim is very limited and then almost nothing. But the law on anti-domestic violence, actually one of the first law that recognize the role of the victims and the protection of the victims in our criminal justice system. So the law actually provide regulations of the victim services, which is become the obligation of the state to provide it, and then a different kind of protection, including the temporary protection, which means that a restriction order if the victim found that the offenders can treat their life. So this is a different kind of victim's right that actually recognized in our law. So in the perspective of women's movement, in the perspective of feminist legal theory, so the law is very important. The law is one of the significant law in protections of women from gender-based violence. But now we know that it's more than 10 years of the implementation, more than, 2004 is about 18 years of the implementations of the law. So they are quite interesting how to see in which situations in which the implementations of the law. Before I discuss about the implementation of the law, I want to show you the data that showing us more and more domestic violence is recognized as a crime. Yeah, so in our criminal statistic in 2020, actually there is a specific data published by the police officer, which they actually inform about one of the case is domestic violence. So there are quite a number. For example, in 2017, there are 8,949 cases reported to the police. And then in 2018, 8,067 cases. And then sometimes there is a dynamic, and then it's kind of the tendency. There are in the same situation, the first 5 years until the 10 years of the implementation, the law is established, the number is increased, but now it's more and more decline, the number of cases reported to the police. Yeah, but the other fact, the increased number of women to apply for divorce increase in the religious court, with religious court actually recognize more than 75% of the divorce is actually related to domestic violence accident. So what I want to say to you, this law is actually the criminal law, but the accidents of domestic violence is increased, but the the accident of domestic violence reported to the different institution increase, but usually they don't really want to use the criminal justice system. Most of the case goes to the criminal, the religious court, that is the civil court, which apply for divorce. So the gap is huge. So this is actually increase. This is raised the question. This raised the question: what is happening? Why the law, the criminal law, is not really utilized, but the women's actually goes to the the religious court. So I think there are some problems with regard to the reported itself. Yeah. So we can say that if the reported case increase, it means that women's more and more aware about their rights. So that is, they know this is domestic violence, and then they will bring, they know their right, and then they are trying to find out to solve their problem. So they can visit different kind of victim service center. They will have kind of consultations with them, and how they will bring the case into which institutions to settle the case. So that's the issue. But I think for the beginning, they start to report it to the police. They find out that the police didn't really think about the case of domestic violence is important case. So they think that it is not supposed to be as a criminal case. So because of it, the women still think, and they don't want to go to the criminal court, because what they want is actually to settle the case, to stop the violence, but they don't want to bring the husbands into the criminal sanction, because when they go to the police, they are informed by the police, if you bring the husbands to the police, it means that we have to arrest your husband, and a husband will be brought into the imprisonment. So it's become a nightmare for the women who actually wants to stop domestic violence they face. So that is why more and more it goes to the criminal, what we call the religious court. And then the other issue, there are also kind of policy established in the police and also the government crisis center, what we call as UPTD or P2T P2A. So in this particular policy established in certain institution, domestic violence is a subject of the mediations. They call that as restorative justice approach. They try to do mediation, but if it is not success, and then they will go to continue the process into the prosecution and then to the court. So what I just want to inform you in short, if we look at the problems of the implementation, actually there are different kind of degree. There is a problem with relate to the substantive of law itself. There is a problem related to the structure of the law and also the culture of the law. From the perspective of substantive of the law, there is a problem where the law is only have a specific scope for the marriage, which is registered marriage. So in Indonesia context, the one institutions of the government institutions actually launched that the marriage is unregistered marriage in Indonesia is more than the registered marriage. So there is an indications that unregistered marriage is more than 50%. So it means that when the women not under the registered marriage goes to the police and report their case, usually the police will refuse the case, because if we look at the law under anti-domestic violence, there is indications the marriage supposed to be under the marriage law, which has to be registered in the state. So this one of the issue, and then there are many women couldn't use the law to protect themselves because they are in the situations of unmarried relation, marriage but unregistered situation, whether it is because of the customary, whether they married because of religions marriage. So the other issue is about the culture law itself, which is the society. So usually the family and the neighbors, they will have refuse the idea if the victims wants to report the case to the police. They say that let's you settle by yourself, don't bring to the police, and then you have to be patient. So it's more likely the culture that are very strong in a way to not supporting women to report the case to the police. And then the other issue is about the structure of the law. So when we discuss about the structure of the law, we discuss about the value of the law enforcers, we discuss about their interests, the capacity, and also the culture of institution. So with regard to the structure of the law, as I mentioned before, domestic violence is not recognized as the priority case. It is not like the terrorism case. It's not like the corruption case. It's not like, people murder, and then IT case, information and technology transaction case. So it's kind of like not a priority for the police department. And then it seems that they see that this is actually bring more burden for us rather than other cases. So they don't really think if this can be go through the continues the case into the prosecution offices. So unless the case is assisted by the NGOs, the victim is reported the case, and then the victim is assisted by the NGOs or is assisted by the women legal NGOs. So most of the cases that are success to be processed and then goes to the court, usually because of it is based on getting help or getting assistance from women's NGO. The problem is not so many women NGOs in Indonesia, and then not so many legal aid women's NGO or legal aid who focusing on women's in Indonesia. So this kind of like the women NGOs is also struggle to divide their sources in a way to assist which case they can handle. So that's kind of a problematic situation as well. So the second one is about the value that actually perceived by the law enforcers. So most of the law enforcers actually reflected the stereotype, reflected the perspective of biased gender, which they will think that this is supposed to be the guilty of the women, the wife. They actually get the violence because they talk too much. They don't serve the husband well, so the husband is tired coming home, and then because of it, and then the wife is so nosy, and then they fight, and then goes to violent. So they say that it is actually a family conflict and it is not as a crime. So the value is very strong, and they actually abandon the existing law. Yeah, rather than the law, they follow their belief. Actually, they are law enforcement, but they follow the belief rather than the written law. So they also have perceptions that it's a sin for women to report their husband. And then because of it, they encourage women to withdraw the cases. And they actually say that it's better to do a mediation. Another aspect of the structure of the law, particularly for the law enforcer, is their interest. In the cases of domestic violence, there is no economic value that they will get, yeah, but they have to spend more money because the budget for handling cases is very limited in police or in prosecutor. With domestic violence, usually the women come, and most of them are poor, and it means that if they handle the case, it's probably the law enforcers have to spend a lot of money. So there is no revenue from the case. So they think it is not really important case then. And then they will handle the case. It's not only because of the NGOs as well, but they might face a certain kind of people. And then in the same time, they will try to defend, or they will try to not continue the case if it is related to the members of their corps. For example, there are cases where the offender is the police officer. The case usually is very difficult to continue. So another aspect is about the knowledge. Yeah, there are very gap in knowledge. Their understanding about the law is very narrow, and sometimes they have incorrect interpretations when they see the law, and then when they look at to every aspect, every elements of the crimes. Yeah. So, for example, they do define marriage as supposed to be the registered marriage, and then if the women from unregistered married report to them, they don't want to use anti-domestic violence law, but they don't also want to use the penal code, who actually can be utilized for a certain degrees in order to address the case. So their interpretation is very narrow. They don't want to find out any law that can be utilized. And then also—
I'm sorry, Dr. Ye, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then the other issue is about the definition of negligence. So the negligence is usually interpreted as people who, the father or the husband who don't provide any economic income to the family. So the offenders usually try not to give any support, whether they can't do that, or whether they are intentions not to provide support to the family because there is a conflict between them. It's one of part of the punishment for the wife because the wife don't follow what they want. So this kind of negligence are not really formulate clearly in the law, and then usually the law enforcers doesn't want to have a different established, and they usually have established their own interpretation, which usually they will say that it's supposed to be 1 year of negligence, so that can be brought into the court, or it's supposed to be certain kind of money that they not support to the family, so it has to be part of the negligence. So there's a different kind of interpretation of negligence. So that is why the issues of violence related to negligence is very difficult to be brought into the court. So I think the last development, actually, because there are strong criticism related to the criminal justice system in order to gender-based violence. So there are initiatives done by every institutions in order to establish the policy. So for example, in the police department, they actually establish the rule with regard to investigation, and then with regard to restorative justice system. And then also in the Attorney General offices, they also have the policy called as restorative justice, and then women access to justice mechanism. Also in the Supreme Court. So in one aspect, we can say this is a very good development, because it means that they are trying to become more responsive to the gender-based violence, particularly to the domestic violence. But the problems in the practice is very different, because in many cases we found that there is a huge of distortions in a way of restorative justice implemented, particularly in the police officer. So my research, previous research, so that there is the restorative justice is not for the victim, but is more likely to delay the case, so the case is not goes to the court, and then to avoid the offender from the criminal punishment. But actually, after there is no threat for them to that their case go to the criminal procedure or go to the court, then they will file for divorce. So there is nothing happens to the offenders, but the victims become more vulnerable because they are divorcing by the husband, and there is no income, there is no responsibility from the husband to the family anymore. So women expect that the attitude of the husband is changed because that is why they choose to have the restorative justice mechanism. But there is nothing significant change in their life. It's more likely with regard to the offender's opportunity. So what I want to say that restorative justice now is more likely to reduce the case as part of the crimes control. Is more likely the technical approach is in order to reduce the burden of the police, but not for the victim. And then if we look at to the policy established by the law enforcers, actually the women's empowerment, the women participation, the women's right is not very strong mentions in the policy of restorative justice established by the law enforcers. So I think that's the end of my presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iye, for your presentation. And we're going to move on to Ibu Siti Husna. Ibu Siti Husna, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you for the time for LBH APIK Jakarta can present about the case we received since the COVID pandemic began into 2019. Okay, I will share the presentation. Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the time. And this is about the case we received in COVID 2019 since 16 March 2019. We received more than 1,000 cases. We received 1,170 cases during the pandemic. Comparison in 2018, LBH APIK Jakarta only received in 790 cases. It is the comparison with a case before and after COVID. Its increase very high. It is a data about forms of we receive. Number one is domestic violence. Next is cyber-based gender violence. It is the very high receive when the COVID-19 began. Every day we get more than 5 cases reported by victims to the hotline of LBH APIK Jakarta. And we receive a dating violence cases, 92 cases. Next, criminal act, 51 cases. Civilian act, 28 cases. Adult sexual violence, 18 cases. And child sexual violence, 16 cases. And other 15 cases. It is the form of domestic violence we receive of physical, psychic, sexual, and economic, and a combination from the physical, psychic, and sexual and economic. The psychic domestic violence is higher than the other, but it's very difficult to us to make a report to the police. It is a comparison cases before and after COVID-19 for the domestic violence. Our victim in LBH APIK Jakarta during the pandemic, choice of solving is more to prefer to mediation, especially at the beginning of the pandemic because of the PSBB policy. It's very limited access to the victim to go to the outside area, such as like because no transportation, we have to the victim go to LBH APIK Jakarta or to go to the police because the PSBB policy. LBH APIK Jakarta help the victim to make a mediation. Use a meeting application such as a Zoom, Google Meeting, and other social media platform for mediation. And if the victim have not smartphone, LBH APIK Jakarta provides Zoom and Google Meet facilities at the office, so the mediation still can be carried out, but the preparator can go to the LBH APIK Jakarta. And it's with a very restricted condition if the victim would like to go to the LBH APIK Jakarta during the pandemic. It is the obstacle experienced by victims of domestic violence during the pandemic. Like I said before, it's about the access. The transportation is very difficult because some transportation are closed. The next is about the protocol in the police station. Many police stations have not strictly implement the health protocol, which makes the victim worry if they have to go to the police station, especially because they have young children or they have to stay with the older parents. So it makes them to think about if they have to go to the police station. And the next obstacle is like we see before, the highest cases we receive is for physical domestic violence. And for psychological domestic violence, is very difficult to access a psychiatric and psychological visum, because psychiatric and psychological visum is the only one evidence we have to provide if we want to report to the police about the case of domestic violence. And so many institutions who provide psychological and psychiatrists in visum are closed. They only make consultation by online. As a result, they can make visum psychiatricum or psychological. So it's another obstacle the victim has to face off. And for the case from the last year, it's very hard to process because the process become longer because so many obstacles they have, like I said before, like transportation, like COVID-19, and the other obstacle is many police officers got a COVID-19, so many police office is closed, so the legal process become longer. And until today, we have no alternative for online reporting and case processing at the police level, so the process become longer and longer. After the violent domestic, we receive a very highest cases is cyber-based gender violence. Malicious distribution is a very massive cases we receive. It comes from the ex-partner or ex-husband, where the woman or victim threatened by ex-partner or husband to spread their intimate photography or video. It is the obstacle faced by the KBJ of victim. Number one is the victim have difficult to reporting the lack of evidence, because many victims already erased the evidence they have about threaten. And number two is because victim has a fear if the perpetrator have they still distribute photo or videos. And number three is we have a limited availability of expert witness who can link online gender-based violence to the IT law. The only institution, LBH APIK Jakarta, working together now to availability of the expert witness on the IT law is only SafeNet. And if we looking for the other, it's a very not cheap. Yeah, we have to pay more, and for the SafeNet it's free, but the expert is very limited. And the other obstacle is about the technology. In Jabodetabek, it's only at Polda Metro Jaya who can make a digital forensic to verification the evidence. As a result, to prove the evidence process is take very long. And number 5 obstacle is in some police office about jurisdiction. They are so many confused who jurisdiction police will take. It's a preparatory jurisdiction or the victim jurisdiction. But we in LBH APIK Jakarta, we push police to choose the victim jurisdiction to receive the police report. It is about dating violence. we have 184 number. The more, like Mbak Ik said, the very hard we have to prove it's about negligence to the kids and about identity of the kids, because for the identity kids, we need a DNA evidence, and it's a cost very high. It is we accompanying criminal acts. We have 51 cases. It is adult sexual violence data. And it is child sexual violence data. We accompanying disability cases too, and during pandemic, we received 20 case data. It is a non-litigation process. We accompanying the victims at LBH APIK Jakarta, konsultasi, mediasi, somasi, safe house, psychological, LPSK, and drafter. For the litigation process, like Mbak Ik said before, it's so hard to us to can make a police report because not every victim want to go to police report. In pandemic, during pandemic, we make a 20 police report for the violence domestic. And for the KBGO, it's only 5 police reports because it's very hard to us to make a report. Like I said before, it's so many obstacles. And besides that, the victim is afraid if they go to the police, they can go to criminalization with a pornography law. So it is only 5 police reports we can go to the police for the KBGO. And for adult sexual violence, we only have 4 police reports because the law enforcement for the sexual violence is very hard to us to make a police report because, like Mbak Ik said, it's so many obstacles we have to push. Like child sexual violence, only 6 reports, and criminal acts, 50 police reports. And when during pandemic 2019, we only accompanying victim of the violent domestic by process at religion court, because religion court is so often too close, so we can access to register the divorce process. It is the best practice during pandemic. We can break through the BAP, the examination police report in Tangerang Selatan Police Office. We can make a BAP online for the KBGO case using a Zoom meeting. We push the police to make a BAP online because the victim has back to their own village, and she can go to the police office. And we push the police to make a Zoom meeting online BAP. And this case has done, and the preparator have a 6-month sentence, and it's very low, we think. But it is the first KBGO cases we can process at the court. Besides the BAP online, we push the trial, the court, to make 2 online witness trial of child rape case. One of the online trial held by the LPSK. so the victim didn't go to the court. She go to the LPSK, and LPSK provides the tools so victim can testify at the LPSK. And the other, we cooperate, working together with our referral institution in Batam, that the victim can testify from Batam, and the court is in the Bogor area. Our referral institution in Batam provides the tools, and the victim testify from our referral institution in Batam. It is the best
Siti
practice.
Husna, you have about 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay. The other best practice we provide for the victim is LBH APIK Jakarta took the initiative to build safe house, because during the pandemic period, case of violence against women continue to increase, and there is a need for victims to quick avoid perpetrators who are the closest people, and difficulties for victims to access safe house because the many conditions must be proved to report the police and to have a COVID-19 free letter. It is a LBH APIK Jakarta site. We site at Jalan Raya Tengah nomor 31 Kramat Jati Jakarta Timur, and until today our consultancy is still online in this number. Besides this number, we can consultancy by the Instagram or by Twitter or by website. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Siti Husna, for your presentation. It's very informative, and I'm sure audience will have questions and things to discuss. We now move to our last presenter, Ibu Alim. You have about 50 minutes, and the screen is yours, Ibu Alim.
Thank you very much, everybody here. And we already listened from the previous speaker about the problem that we face during the pandemic and also the achievement. I will share my screen relating to Indonesian women's experiences in dealing with the impact of pandemic COVID-19. Okay, because only 15 minutes, I just want to present my PowerPoint. First of all, I will introduce the Komnas Perempuan and also the women's contribution and resilience in responding pandemic situation, impact of pandemic COVID to women, the government regulation, and also turning the impact of the pandemic into blessing. Okay, Komnas Perempuan established in response to strong public demand, especially from women, for the state to take responsibility for violence against women. And also there is a tragedy and sad tragedy at that time in 1998, and the national mechanism to protect women rights that established by presidential decree. So Komnas Perempuan is human rights institution, independent in Indonesia. There are 2 mandates and also 5 tasks. One of them is promote public awareness and also research and review relevant laws and regulation, and monitor report on violence against women and human rights, human rights, provide input and recommendation, and also develop regional and international cooperation. This is the introduction that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought serious impact due to the massive scale that occurred all over the world, as we know, and also in various disasters, women often become one of the most vulnerable group to be affected, especially in the context of culture of patriarchy that intervene with the misogynic interpretation of religion and the unfriendly economic and political system toward women. In Indonesian context, although rather delayed, government has included women in the decision making in handling the situation of women, children, and vulnerable group during the pandemic. Women experiences both as individual and group in responding to the impact of pandemic also deserve some appreciation. During the pandemic, women have shown their resilience, creativity, and put forward women's collaboration. Impact pandemic COVID-19 to women, violence against women, and also women's multiple burdens, women's economic vulnerability, adaptation with technology, and psychological impact of women. This is the data during the 2020 from the 120 institution service institution, that the riskiest of violence against women is the personal private level, in marriage or in the household, domestic violence, and in personal relation, which was 79%, or around 3,000 more. Yeah, in the previous year, the case of violence against women at the personal level also around 75%, so increased 4% in 2020. Domestic and personal violence, that the wife, violence toward wife is the highest numbers in domestic violence, and then the second one in during the dating violence, yeah, and also for girls. And if we look at the personal level, most of the violence was physical, yeah, and followed by sexual and psychological violence. And if we see that in this number, sexual violence, yeah, in komunitas is also the highest number, but in the personal is still physical. And this is the one that very significant number, which is on gender violence online. Yeah, online based gender violence at the domestic personal level increased from 35 cases to 329%. It means increased 920%. And according to report directly to Komnas Perempuan, there are 300% increase as well during the 2020, which is from 281 to 942 cases. Research by Komnas Perempuan that are still many patriarchal culture in society. Women work almost 4 times as much as men in doing household chores with a duration of more than 3 hours. Women are more susceptible to exposure to COVID-19 because there are many female medical personnel, nurses, more tired and also stressed. The victim who reported experiencing more frequently violence during COVID-19, yeah, there were around 88% of women, 10% of men, and also there are around 80.3% who did not report to the service agencies. It means they choose silent, not reporting their case to the service agency. 10% they report increased relationship tension. Yeah, their relationship tension is increased with their partner. Also, if we can see that the issue, the family, the issue of education, yeah, during the pandemic in the family, the belief in society that place women as educators make women experience vulnerability during the pandemic. The family was initially not ready to take over the role of all subject teachers. Family, especially mother, are required to understand all learning outcome and effort to fulfill them technology, and also technology adaptation, yeah, capacity, economy, and infrastructure. Children use their mother devices to learn from home more than their father devices. Women contribution and resilience in responding pandemic situation. If we look at, there are positive impact as well, not always negative impact from pandemic, which is, as we know, that reduce factory emission, transportation, so that the air is clear, family attachment, quality time with family, increase economic creativity, improve the quality and capability of online learning, also make it easy to disseminate idea across country, across time and across border, yeah, because we use online technology like what we done now. This is the good practices from some group of women organization, that COVID-19 prevention education, also donation of the basic necessities, economic empowerment, increased food security, policy advocacy partnership. So this is the charity work that done by women's organization, and then they try to give free sembako, yeah, in the neighborhood. I'm trying to find, choose one of the organization with which is in Muhammadiyah and Aisyah. They have the Muhammadiyah COVID-19 Command Center, that they update the number of donation collected throughout Indonesia. There are a lot of work has been done by them, and this is beneficiary of Muhammadiyah Response. There are many activities they did for responding this pandemic, and this is just documentation what they have done. And then from the government regulation dealing with the pandemic impact for women and vulnerable group, actually the government already produced some protocol for handling cases of violence against women during the pandemic, also gender perspective elderly protection during the COVID-19, and also guideline for special protection and more for women with disabilities, guideline for the protection of Indonesian women migrant worker, protocol for handling cases of gender violence and trafficking of Indonesian migrant women worker, and also family health protocol. This is the example that in that protocol, also there are hotline inside the protocol throughout Indonesia. And some of the observation found that there is turning the impact of pandemic into blessing. Implementing the values of equality in taking care of domestic work and caring. Don't let the mother get tired alone. So we can promote this idea to the family, and also prioritizing basic need in purchasing, and the understanding that working from home make it possible for some people to decrease their target or achievement, and take advantage of the time to cultivate positive and egalitarian family values, and strengthening both parents are responsible for children. So not only for women, not only for mother, but both parents are responsible for educating children. Okay, strengthen the equal partnership in the family. As we know that the society still, some of them still in the traditional feudal values. Yeah, we try to promote the equal partnership values, which is in the 4 areas. We are responsible, man and woman, mother and father, male and female. Yeah, in the both in the four areas. Okay, this is the example that we try to promote, yeah, that from various type of the family, that the happy or Sakinah family is guaranteed that there is no form of violence in any form of the violence, and ensuring the growth and the development of all family members, ensuring the balance relationship, their basic needs are met, believing in all roles as noble and as the key to the heaven, and always perpetuate the kindness in the family. We try to turning the hierarchical relation to egalitarian relationship. So basically from the God, husband, wife, we try to change, yeah, that husband and wife have the same equal status before God. the husband and wife relations is not like a candle, yeah, which is the candle trying to allowing oneself to be destroyed to make someone happy. So this is not the one that we consider to get a happy family. To get happy family, that we give enlightenment to others, but also we have our own happiness as well. So it is important to convince, to make assertive communication, not for silent communication. So this is just adjust the curriculum of your family and take care of yourself, because we do not go to the mosque, we do not go to the church, so try to make our own religious curriculum for our own family. And also there are creative effort to eliminate the burden during the pandemic. For example, have a play with pet and coloring your house, gardening. So this is quite the massive in Indonesia to handle the pandemic situation. Conclusion, women are one of the group most vulnerable and most affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. This is because women are believed to be more concerned with and closer to caring work, while men do not make any effort to lighten their burden. Therefore, in the context of disaster, women tend to experience more vulnerable than men because of the role of care that is placed on women. The workload for women during the COVID-19 pandemic is getting heavier. Implementing the values of equality in taking care of domestic work and caring. Don't let mother get tired alone. I think this is some conclusion, and also one more conclusion, that even though it is a bit late, the government has tried to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic by issuing many rules and protocol. In subsequent development, the government began to try to involve women in decision-making with Ministry of Women Empowerment and Protection, a specific mandate related to handling of women, children, and vulnerable groups. There are women's collective action effort, both individually and in group or organization, to survive during this pandemic. These efforts are important to be recognized and appreciated. As stated by the maximizer theory, it appears that women have a unique creativity in facing a pandemic, have resilience, and also promote collaboration in reducing the impact of pandemic. Thank you very much. I think that's all from my presentation, and we can discuss in more detail.
Thank you so much, Ibu Alim, and it's good to hear from all three speakers. First from Dr. E, who have provided some context and from a legal perspective, and from Ibu Siti Husna with her information from the cases that is being handled by the LBH APIK. And finally, from Professor Alim, who talks about not only about the current issues, but also the government regulations and responses to address this gender-based violence during the pandemic. Now we are moving to the question and answer sessions, and while waiting for others to type their question or raise their hand, or I will read one question that has typed in by Diana Contreras Suarez. And so this is a question for all panelists. Is there any research done that try to find out what is the proportion of women who does not report domestic violence to either police or religious corps? So for Dr. E in particular, Diana, she wonders if we know what was the divorce request due to domestic violence prior to 2021. Please.
Thank you very much. If we look at the data from police officer and then the data from the statistic body in Indonesia, it's mentioned that unreported case but it's general. It's not for domestic violence, but unreported case is about 78.2% of the crimes happens in Indonesia. So they put a very broad one, but if we look at the data between the divorce applying by women and then the case reported to the police, it means that the case reported to the police is lower, much lower, yeah, than the case brought into the religious court. I think particularly in pandemic, it's become more and more cases goes to the religious court compared to the criminal court. I think Siti Husna already mentions because of during pandemic, the police condition is much worse, yeah, compared to the before, yeah. I don't want to generalize it because as Siti Husna mentioned before, there are several police department or police officer that are very open, yeah, to bring the case and then even to do the online investigation. But most of the case and most of the research done, it's showing that there is a problematic situations in criminal justice system. It's because of the first stage, that is the investigation process, is not really friendly to women's victim of domestic violence. And the other issue is because of the criminal court punishment focusedly on put the husband into jail or fines. It's not focusing on the rehabilitation. It's not focusing on reconciliation. And then that's another issue why I think more and more women feel that they don't really want to bring the case into the criminal justice system. So from my analysis that from the data from the police, I just mentioned that only 2% of the case actually brought into the court. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. How about Ibu Siti and Ibu Alim? Do you want to weigh in on what your sense of the proportion of women who does not report domestic violence to either police or religious court? We can start with Ibu Siti, if you have want to weigh in.
Yeah, like Ibu Ayik said before, why the woman can't go to the police report is so many factors. It's just not because the pandemic, but it's more than it's a social keadaan sosial at the family. So if we go to the police to report your husband, it is like a crime for the woman, like a dosa. You have to. It's very dangerous to you to the women to go to the police, and when she come home, the preparator will stay with the woman, with the victim. So it's a higher threat for the victim if they go to the police, because we in Indonesia, we don't have any restriction for the preparator to maybe in Australia we have EVO, like the preparator has to get away from the victim for menjaga jarak from the victim. In Indonesia, we don't have any situation for that. We have the law in Undang-Undang Nomor 23, but the implementation is not still until today. We can go with the law to make the implementation.
Okay, so Bu Alim, what do you think about this? The numbers?
Yeah,
the undocumented.
Yeah, I just want to share the number of divorce. This is last year divorce that recorded in religious court and also recorded in Komnas Perempuan Catahu, which is the fighting continuously for the couple, yeah, is the highest number, and violence against women is also highest, yeah, because like 3,000 some 3,000 more, yeah. So, and if we look at this number, yeah, the domestic violence, and also as recorded in Komnas Perempuan, that wife beating is the highest number from the domestic violence. But if we look at overall, the number that reported to the police or to the aparat penegak hukum, to the police, yeah, is only 20%. Yeah, is only 20%. From the 20%, the one who really finished everything is decided from the court is only 1%. So I think it's very, because sometimes although they go to the police, but suddenly they take, yeah, they take the case, they take down the case, so it's not going again to the police. So I think relating to the problem because of domestic violence still problematic in Indonesia, because sometimes it's like honeymoon cycle, yeah. Although the wife is already reported to the police, but because of the husband try to no, and then they come back and then they take down the report. So I think there are many cases it's happened. Although they already reported to the police or maybe reported to the Komnas Perempuan as well, yeah, they take down the report.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to another question. There's Ibu Atia Yuma. You want to ask the question live or?
Thank you. Yeah, if I may raise question to the presenters, I think for all presenters, if we know that the police plays important role here. So from your knowledge, is there any significant efforts to like kind of improve the capacity of police to deal with the victim, especially for deal with the victims, yeah? Sometimes it turns that the police not helping the victim, but kind of bullying or even shaming the victim. So is there any capacity, is there any efforts to help the police as an institution to improve their capacity to kind of have the more empathy for to the victims? Thank you, Pak Firman.
Okay, should we start with anyone? Ibu Dr. Yi, maybe?
Maybe this is for Ibu Alimatul Qibtiyah to respond it.
Okay, I think we already have program SPPTP KKTP. I don't know what is in English, Mbak. SPPTP KKTP.
Integrated Criminal Justice System for Violence Against Women.
Yeah, that's yeah, okay, stand for from the SPPTP KKTP. Yeah, this is one of the concept that we work collaboratively with all stakeholders from police and also the hospital and also the service institution and Komnas Perempuan and the government. We try to work together to deal with problem, and one of the program is also capacity building for the police. Yeah, capacity building for the police to make aware that they don't blame the victim, and then they try to make not traumatic for the victim, but still, yeah, still more far away to have the real and ideal condition that all the police have good perspective on the victim. Yeah.
Thank you, Bu Alim. Is there any like kind of SOP or standard of procedures how the police in kind of deal with the victims. Yeah, there is the SOP. Yeah.
I can answer this question. Okay, it depends on the institution, and it depends on the region. For example, in Yogyakarta, we do have a certain kind of mechanism with in collaborations, including the SOP in collaboration between law enforcers. So in a very difficult case, usually if it is brought into the forum, it's kind of the forum between the law enforcers and the victims organizations. So usually the case can be handled very well. But it is based on the local bylaw provided by the local governments of Yogyakarta. And then beside that, there is also the what we call it, the guidelines of the police in handling the victim. It is just recently the 8 number 2021, and then the 2019. Yeah, but the problem, what I mentioned before, the way how they perceive a victim perspective is very different. Yeah, so I think it's not really what we, women's movement, NGOs, Komnas Perempuan perceive victims perspective, which is actually we focusing on what is the victim's need and what is the victim's interest. It's more likely have a bias with the law enforcer's interest. So that's the problem. That is why I mentioned before, the implementation is need to be studied further, because it is a new policy. In the past of the implementation is a very delicate issue, and it's in many situations it is turned into the other way around. It is not for victims. It is not for victim. It is not for victim. It's more like the police business, and then for the offenders. But we do find a very interesting cases and very wonderful mechanism when, what I mentioned before, when the NGOs is a very active, in a guidance and in communicating with the law enforcer. We do find, and then that is why we find a very good decisions with regard to domestic violence, and a very good mechanism with regard to domestic violence, but it is very rare. Thank you.
Maybe I want to just give one example what we have done from Komnas Perempuan when last year become the saksi ahli, apa Mbak? Saksi ahli.
The witness testimony.
Yeah, witness testimony, one of the cases because there are domestic violence, and then the perpetrator is he is the governor officer and public figure, and then from our testimony, from our witness testimony, make the perpetrator is fired from the governor. Yeah, so, and I think this is successful story, because then we give like pressure, from the aparat penegak hukum, from the policymaker to deal with this problem, and now I think they already got fired from the governor because of the public figure position, and then they did a domestic violence for his wife.
Okay, so still long way to go, ya Ibu.
There is always progress, but there is also the backlash. So we are in the situations like that.
So let's move on to another question, and this one is related to data, and it's so we're going back to data, and it's asked by by Dina Afiandi, and she wants to ask the questions live. And then I'm going to go over the question that is listed in Q&A. Please, Dina.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Firman, and thank you to all the three speakers for your very insightful and informative presentations. My question is for Ibu Iyi and also Ibu Alim. First, because my other question has been answered by Ibu Siti. So, Bu Iyi, you mentioned in your presentations that the number of unregistered marriage is way more than the registered marriage, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm wondering if what has happened if these women who are involved in unregistered marriage experience violence? Will the authorities still provide protections, or are they being neglected by the authority? That was my question. And the second one is to Ibu Alim. So like you mentioned in your presentation, the common idea among Muslim men is that they have authorities over women's bodies and they can regulate what women can and cannot do. And I think from my research, this is going to be a hurdle in the eliminations of violence against women. So I'm wondering what's your thought, the measures or strategies that do you believe can be implemented to address these issues? Like, you know, I know, for example, women's organizations have done a lot to counter this, but what do you think the progress has been? And then if you think it's been difficult, what else can Indonesians women's organizations or Muslim-based organization can do to address this? Thank you.
Okay, I answer directly, Pak Firman.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. I think just recently I've been communicating with one prosecutor, and before with judge, they asked me questions because they face some reported from married women but unregistered married. So my answer to them, why don't you protect them? Why don't you process the case? They said that there is no law with regard to that case because anti-domestic violence is only for the registered married. So we can't do anything. So basically, when they found there is no law under anti-domestic violence with regard to the unregistered married, they stop, and then there is no protection. But I then communicate with them. So have a look at to the article in penal code, the article 341 and 344. So what do you think? And then they said, oh, okay, this is actually the law actually mentioned that there is the heavier punishment for those who are beaten by the member of the family. Yes, I said, even before we don't have any domestic violence law, we do have that particular article, which is you never see it. So what I mentioned that this is about the perceptions. Yes, mostly they are unprotected unless they are getting help in order to to access the justice. And then that is why I think you mentioned also about the court. Yeah, that is why most of them actually doesn't want to bring the case into the criminal case. Only a certain women who know their rights goes to the court. It's because they are more educated, unregistered married, but they are educated. That's quite kind of interesting as well. But they goes to they are also very difficult to file divorce because they are unregistered. So I just having in the process of doing research now with women's as a householders, because there are huge number of them, and then most of them actually unregistered married. So what they do actually, they try to register first their marriage and then they apply for divorce. So what in Indonesian legal system we call that isbat nikah. Yeah, it means that you register your marriage, but it is for applying divorce. So that's the mechanism they do, so they can have a clear position that they are actually not in the marriage relations anymore. So that's one of the what we call that the plurality of law. So I will answer directly with Pak Muhammad Ahmad. So yes, they.
So yes, let me read the Muhammad Amar question, and we're going to try to combine that with a question by Ann Ambler, and everyone can answer this. First, Pak Amar asked about the huge gap between DV cases reported religious court and criminal court, and whether it's related to the revival of radical Islam in Indonesia. And this is, Dr. Yik will answer this, but others are also welcome to answer. And a somewhat related questions by Ann Amber is talking about the status of husband and wife. Does Professor Alim see real progress among younger generations, or do they follow in parents' footsteps? What age are the youngsters who are changing the culture, if any? I think these two are somewhat related. Please, Dr. Yik, continue, please.
Okay, thank you. I have a different opinion, Pak Muhammad Amar, yeah, with regard to whether they apply for divorce to religious court in order to address their domestic violence is part of the Islamic radical Islamic Islam revivals. Yeah, I think it's not the case of Indonesia context. I think in Indonesia we do have a pluralism in legal system. It means that there are different mechanisms that can be utilized in order to settle cases. With regard to domestic violence, yes, we do have criminal law and criminal court, but in our Islamic, our religious court, one of the strong reasons to apply divorce is also because of the women face violence. So violence, domestic violence, is recognized in our Islamic compilations law. In my opinion, it is one of the progressive approach, because in Islamic Indonesian's law, we do also recognize women's applying divorce. And then we do also recognize women's right in property, in the marital matrimonial property. So it means that Indonesian compilations law in some situation is very progressive. So in this particular issue, I think women utilize different law based on their condition and situation. I think it's one of their choices. And then if you look at the data that I presented before, actually Indonesians religious court make compilating data about the domestic violence that goes through the court. I think the most data on domestic violence case from Komnas Perempuan came from the religious court body. So it means that they are quite progressive in terms of the issue. However, yes, we still have faced different kind of lack of perceptions as well. In many cases, just last week, I went to the one court to be testifying of the case, yeah, as the witness testimony, and in religious court. So they are actually kind of questions about women who apply divorce. So they still have a strong perception in somehow. And then I told them, oh, Badilak is a very progressive. I think you have to calculate and you have to consider about the women's right too, because they actually apply for the custody of the child. So they are in conflicting custody of the child. In terms of the judge perception, they say that, oh, because women apply for divorce, women leave the house. So it means that the woman is not a good wife. So this is mentioned directly in the court. And then I mentioned to them, no, you have to look at why they are leaving to the house. I think it's because of domestic violence, and then they want to protect themselves, but it doesn't mean that they become not a good mother. So that's perception is still there. But in general, I think there are some progressive movement as well in Indonesian religious court. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bu Alim, do you want to add on that, and also the generations, the question about the generation, and also Ibu Siti, want to add?
I want to respond from Mbak Dina question. Hello, Mbak Dina. She is also one of my friends. Okay. First, what is the measure that our movement is successful, and how the strategy? Yeah. First of all, for the strategy, to make our movement, progressive movement, successful, we try to not leaving the religious text, but embrace the religious text by giving new interpretation and new perspective, which is moderate or progressive perspective. Because as we know, in Indonesia, 96% of people believe in religion. So if we leave the religious text, it means that we are not someone who can become reference. So first, not leaving the religious text, but embrace them and produce the progressive interpretation, which is Bayani level. And the second one, convince with the data, with the experiment, with the knowledge, with the research, that what we are trying to argue is not just opinion, but it is real with data. So we call it burhani, yeah, in burhani level. And the last one, it starts their heart. If that happened to your sister, if that happened to your mother, so what is your feeling? So this is touching the heart, yeah, touching the heart. And then what is the indicator that we are progressing, not decreasing, yeah, our movement? At least right now, for example, Mbak Yi and I and many other women activists in Indonesia is not stopping to giving public awareness. Maybe Mbak Yi and me, 1 week, how many times we give a public awareness to the community? So the more they want to ask, it means the more successful we are. Yeah, this is one of the indicator that we are successful. At least right now, I don't have any personal message that they ask me to istighfar because of my idea. But in like 20 years ago, some of them tag me, and then also call me, please istighfar Bu Alim, this is not Islamic. But it's not happen anymore right now. So it's mean that right now the progressing, yeah, is changing the mind, changing the belief. Is not like open the hand, yeah, but it's very difficult. And I think one of the most progress, I think, because I myself one of the member of the Majlis Tarjih in Muhammadiyah level, in the national level. Majlis Tarjih is like council institution or fatwa institution. Yeah, this is the prestigious division, and I'm one of them. And then when we try to discuss the sensitive issue, and then they're more acceptable. Yeah, they're more acceptable. Particularly the one that very controversial issue relating to women imam for mixed group, for example. We already discussed that in that institution. So I think it's quite okay. But again, yeah, not there is always, yeah, if you're trying to make something better, always there is challenge, and then we have to face them patient by patient. Yeah, I think that's one. So if the question about the age, I think many young people invite us as resource person, yeah, from the student and also from the association of the student in the high school and also at university. I think now there are yeah, increasing number for awareness to have equal values.
Thank you. Because we have so many interesting questions, and I know we're running a bit of it. I'm going to just start one final round of questions, and I'm going to invite Ingrid Irawati and Naima both to ask their questions live. Yes, and I would like everyone to answer. So can maybe Ingrid go first?
Okay, hi, sorry. So my question is about what has been the role of the public legal system. For example, the Office of the Jaksa, especially during the COVID, and how cases have been handled, because it is correct that we have to talk about the role of the police, but how about the Jaksa? But they are also a very important part, especially related to the victims seeking justice. So, and also why I'm asking this, because my understanding is that early this year in March, there was the launching of the Pedoman nomor 1 tahun 2021 tentang akses keadilan bagi perempuan dan anak dalam penanganan perkara pidana. And I was wondering whether there has been some development or implementation. Has it been used? Is it not known? Because I've also went through the internet. I saw that in several kejaksaan at subnational level in the daerah, they have been doing some talks about this new pedoman. And so I was wondering how things are nowadays. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And before everyone answered, can Naima now ask your question? Can you please shorten that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ibu. Very insightful discussions. I would like to ask specific to early or child marriage in terms of domestic violence and how the frontliners, usually women's group, LBH APIK in daerah, how can we leverage or government leverage their supports to helping them doing their job. Thank you, Ibu.
Yes, and for the last question, maybe later Ibu Siti Husna has also some insight about the cases of number if it's related to your cases as well. So let's, okay, who wants to answer Ibu Ingrid Irawati's question first? Maybe Bu I?
Yes, thank you. I think we have to acknowledge that the guidelines established by the prosecutor offices, the general attorney offices in 2021 is a very important step, because before we know that the prosecutor is very passive in order to handling cases of sexual violence, gender-based violence, domestic violence. So with these guidelines, actually the attorney or the prosecutor need to do pre-prosecutor process, which make them more active in a way in communicating with the victim, even in arresting women if the women have a problem. So there are very important aspect. And then this guideline is actually as legitimations of the needs of the as the needs of the women to be evaluated through the visum et psychiatricum and then visum et repertum, which is a very rare. The police and the prosecutor ask this to the forensic. Usually it is something that they don't use, but in the many cases of domestic violence, as Siti has already mentioned, if it is psychological violence, so it is a must to have it. Now, the prosecutor have to ask the investigator, that is the police, to provide it, which is very important. However, in Indonesian's context, we still need to do a monitoring system. We still need to do communicating with them in order to look at to the implementation. Yeah, I think the implementation is the problematic issues, especially it is a new one. Yeah, even the 2004 laws, not all prosecutors aware about the domestic violence. So that's another issues. With regard to the second question, Naima, I just finished research on underage marriage. Yeah, it is very interesting because we just having a new law of a revision of marriage law, which actually to improve the under marriage, for women now is 19. Yeah, the problem is we don't revise the dispensations mechanism that established in the law, and then there is a process of dispensation as well in Supreme Court in order to give a guideline of the judge when they consider to make a verdict with regard to the applications of the dispensation if the women wants to get married underage. So my finding is very shocking, because in the decision that I found, many cases, the application of dispensation is related to younger, under 15, 13, 16, marriage to the adult male, which the age is 30, 32, 35. And then I found there is a huge gap, which in my opinion, it is actually as the sexual exploitation. But this sexual exploitation actually is not allowed under the criminal law, but it is legitimized with the decision made by the court as the dispensations verdict. So I already give an alarm this, and then I think to the Badilak through my organization in Peka, and I also alarm this to Komnas Perempuan because it is a shocking issue. So I think there is a problematic issue still with regard to under marriage age, which actually it is part of the exploitations of women. So it's part of sexual violence.
Thank you. We're going to go later to Bu Alim to address that, but first to Ibu Siti Husna. Do you have experience with the new pedoman that Ingrid Irawati mentioned, and also things, cases about related to child marriage that you want to add?
This perja is very new, I think, but we LBH APIK Jakarta hope that the perja will be like Perma 3 2017 2017, so we can monitor the court and the judge who on the court, and they have a perspective about a woman perspective. Maybe it's the guidelines to the jaksa to can provide the victim and to make a justice for the woman. I think we hope it's like a Perma 3 2017, and me and LBH APIK Jakarta and Ibu Ik maybe we'll monitoring this perja, and we can, or maybe next year we can have another perception about this perja, and we can how the perja is implementation, because it's very new, and I think we hope can implementation soon as possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Finally, Ibu Alim, do you want to give a?
Yeah, child marriage is a big issue because the riskiest is for the women, not for the male. Yeah, if we look at the data, 1 from 9 girls married child marriage, but for male is 1 from 100. 1 from 100 male boys. Yeah, so it's mean that for the child married, because usually socially after getting married, then the women getting pregnant and then have to get out from school, and then they have a limitation for potential development and so on and so on. So I think this is very alarming, yeah, because last year the number of dispensation, as Mbak I mentioned, that from 23,000 to 64,000. So this is very increasing number, and then it means so far the number of married who has married from 16 to 19 is huge. Yeah, is huge, and then most of them are girls because there are many girls who get married with adults. Yeah, so the number is very alarming, and then I really appreciate Mbak Yi who already analyzed the data, which is many sexual violence on child marriage. So maybe we can discuss later, Mbak Yi, to make the next step what we have to do to stop the child marriage. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. That's a topic for another webinar, I'm sure. So. With that, we end our session and our seminar today. And thank you so much for all the speakers and all the attendees. And we'll see you again at our next seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much.